process, but
Oh, yeah.
we finally got it done.
Good.
Spent all afternoon at a fire and soccer. So
Uh-oh, and so, wow.
We're done.
Smutty Lane.
I heard somebody hit a biker at the end of Clark's Woods Road.
That happened as well.
Oh, boy.
That's not good.
Smutty Lane off Route 5.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
All right, a little bit late, but we'll get going. Welcome to the Town of Lyman Ordinance Review Committee meeting. I believe we do have a quorum, so we can actually have a meeting where we can actually vote on stuff. How exciting. Couple of notes. Mr. Dave Dulong cannot be here tonight. Mr. Steve Marola said he cannot be here tonight as well, so putting it out there. This meeting is being recorded. Again, we just asked that.
Is Lee Schatz retired?
Oh, yes, sorry. And Lee Schatz did send me an email indicating that because of work commitments, he can no longer participate in these meetings because he works these nights. So he's officially tendered his resignation again. And so we just have to fill that position at some point. So thank you for reminding me of that. I would have forgotten all about that.
Dave, the help is
Yeah.
Dave. That's Dave.
Yeah. And again, this meeting's being recorded, and just be respectful of each other when we try to speak. Raise your hand. I'll do my best to make sure that I see you, and just give everybody a chance to speak and keep your comments and your suggestions respectful about it for each other. So let's just. So I call the meeting to order. Let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Everybody should have a copy of the agenda. Is there anything, it's pretty standard, but is there anything that we need to add that I may have blatantly forgot to stick in there someplace before we get too far?
Yeah, just the public hearing.
That's right, I did forget to put that in there, didn't I? So we'll put that in there first, before number 5, so public hearing. The remote participation policy. Okay. Okay. Everybody take a quick minute and review. If you didn't get a copy of the minutes from last meeting from November 2nd, scan through them, see if they look good to you, or any corrections that might need to be done to them, we can get that to Dave.
We're obviously opening the meeting. Should we not open the public hearing first?
Oh, actually, you're right. You do have to do that first. I apologize. Yep, true. So we have a public hearing. And again, it was brought to this committee. We have a couple of members that will not be here during the winter months and would like to participate remotely and stay on the Ordinance Review Committee. So in order for us to do that via the proper channels and methods, we have to have a public hearing on that. So I guess this is the opening of the public hearing concerning that.
You want to read that policy or is it too long?
I can read it.
I don't know, I mean, maybe anyone can watch it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll read it. It's only one page. It's not that long. So, remote participation policy, Town of Lyman Ordinance Review Committee, pursuant to 1 MRS section 403B as in Bravo, and after public notice and hearing, the above named body adopts the following policy to govern the participation via remote methods of members of the ORC, which is Ordinance Review Committee, and the public in the public proceedings or meetings of the ORC. Members of the ORC are expected to be physically present for the meetings except when not practicable, such as in the case of an emergency or urgent issue that requires the ORC to meet via remote methods, or an illness or temporary absence of a member that causes significant difficulty traveling to the meeting location or when traveling, working out of the state. All ORC meetings will be accessible by Zoom or other remote platform when possible. A member who is unable to attend a meeting in person will notify the chair or presiding officer of the ORC as far as in advance as possible. Remote methods of participation may include telephonic or video technology allowing simultaneous reception of information and may include other means necessary to accommodate disabled persons. Remote participation will not be by text-only means such as email, text messages, or chat functions. The public will be provided a meaningful opportunity to attend via remote methods when any member of the ORC participates via remote methods, if practicable. If public input is allowed or required at the meeting, an effective means of communication between the ORC and the public will also be provided if practicable. The committee chairperson may instruct the moderator to force mute members of the public who are disruptive to the proceedings. The public will also be provided with an opportunity to attend the meeting in person unless there is an emergency or urgent issue that requires the entire ORC to meet using remote methods. Note, all of the meetings will be provided in accordance with MRS Section 406 and any applicable charter, ordinance, policy, or by law. When the public may attend via remote methods, notice will include how the public may access the meeting remotely and will provide a method for disabled persons to request necessary accommodation to access the meeting. Notice will also identify a location where the public may attend the meeting in person. The ORC will not restrict public attendance to remote access except when in the case of an emergency or urgent issue that requires the ORC to meet using remote methods of attendance. The ORC will make all documents and materials to be considered by the ORC available electronically or otherwise when practicable to the public who attend remotely to the same extent customarily available to the public who attend in person, provided no additional costs are incurred by the town of Lyme. And that's the entire policy.
And the real intention is that you're not gonna have remote participation unless a member is participating remotely. Is that a correct thought?
If one or more members would be participating remotely, yes, we would invoke this policy and we would follow the guidelines to include the public per this section. Yep. And if nobody is attending remotely, we would not need to do that. I think we clarified that with Lindsay at the last meeting, right? That you're understanding?
So the only thing you would have to do then is if someone's not gonna be available that wants to participate remotely, then there's gonna be, has to be some notification to the public, I guess, right?
Mhm.
On the town website. I would assume that's where you'd be.
I think she mentioned some other means too. There was the website and like the sign and other things.
Oh,
There were, I think that she mentioned, you weren't here, but I think she mentioned in multiple ways that they let people, the public know.
Yeah.
But yeah,
yeah, so actually, it's only gonna be primarily when somebody is gonna be here who wants to participate remotely.
correct.
Right.
Okay.
You know, if you're out because of surgery, for example,
Right,
you're not going to attend remotely probably.
right.
But I think
So
in
you have
fairness,
to plan ahead, my point.
yeah, in fairness though, like people might like feel like they're sick, like I don't want to give it to somebody else, but I feel okay, I can attend remotely. I think what we ought to clarify though is if you intend not to be at this meeting because you're sick and I'm not going to be able to pay attention because I'm coughing or whatever, that's one thing. But if you intend to, if your intention is to attend remotely, you need to speak up like ASAP because I think there are minimum timelines or lead times, for Lindsay to get information out and make sure the agenda is out there or, minutes that we're going to be reviewing, that kind of stuff. Any document for that matter has to be made available, in advance. George? Sorry, I'm sorry, you're done?
Yeah, and also, are you gonna put, maybe you're already doing this, I didn't check, but are you gonna put minutes and, on the website? It should be.
Yes, and Dave is already sending Lindsay a copy of the approved minutes and she's posting those on the website. Yep,
Thank you.
you're welcome. George?
So protocol wise, how do we know if somebody attended the meeting or how do we, how do we report attendance? Do we say so many people attended in person, so many attended remotely?
So I guess for committee members, I mean, obviously, though, first of all, let's state up front, the only way we can participate, have members of this committee participate remotely is through Zoom. I'm assuming that's what we're going to use. And so we would know who's on that Zoom meeting and, we would check off if you're in attendance or not. As far as the public is concerned, I mean, I think you guys tell me, because you used this on the select board before. I mean, if the public is in attendance, you have to record that as well, who was there by the public, or do you not? need to record it.
It's automatically on YouTube or Zoom, it's there.
Well, no, how is it there?
Huh?
I mean, it isn't automatic, you have to sign in or something.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
your sign in.
No, I meant if
That goes out. The sign-in is part of the information that goes out to everybody.
Right.
You go to that link,
And you have to.
and
put
then
your
you're a
name
part
in.
of the meeting.
Oh, but you're saying for remote, but what if you attend in person, you sign in? We've been having people in the planning board, our wonderful clerk actually, has people signing
Yeah, we
in.
probably should.
And she's been putting it on I think, Joe, in the minutes, pretty sure it's in the minutes.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure we have that as a quote requirement in our bylaws or not, but she's been doing it. I think it's not a bad idea, because it does record then,
Who was there?
who was there, and then because sometimes, as you know, with the YouTube, you may not know who the person is, or if they're not at the microphone, you might not be able to hear them. So she's been putting out a sheet there for signing in as you come in, and not for the board members, but for members of the public or people who
So-
are on the board.
I agree, it's not a bad idea to do it, but I guess my first question would be is, for a committee, is it required? I mean, it might be for a board.
Okay, that's a point.
If it's just a committee and we're just trying to work out,
Okay.
be the worker bees, like I said, I'm not opposed to it. I'm just curious what the requirement is, because one of the concerns I would have is if we're trying to keep track, obviously we want to know what committee members are on the Zoom meeting so we can record their attendance. But if they're a public, do we automatically now have to keep track of the public that's
Yeah.
joining? And is that a requirement?
I'm just looking through the minutes of the
Yeah, I
previous
don't think it
meetings
is.
that are on the website, and we've never recorded the public's attendance with the exception of our liaisons
Right.
and the town manager.
Well,
That may have been
and
a
if-
comment on my part.
if the-
Disregard.
if the public speaks, they'll identify themselves
Right.
with their address and.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
So now they're
part of the
recorded
record
anyway.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay, so we should be able to capture that in the minutes. And I mean, just the fact that you were attending remotely and listening in, but you didn't say anything.
No.
I don't know the point in recording that. So, but it doesn't sound like there's any requirement for us to do that anyway. So, but this is a public hearing, so that's a little bit different. But
So
Again.
are committee members going to vote?
if they're on the Zoom meeting, yes, that's the whole point. Yep. Yep. That's the whole point of this effort, is to provide a means for committee members that cannot attend in person for one reason or another, but can still participate in the meeting. They'll do that via Zoom, and they'll be full voting members for that meeting if we have a quorum, obviously. But, make sense?
Mhm.
Okay.
So
Questions from the public? All two of you? Okay. So,
You can close the public hearing.
so if there is no other discussion or no other questions, I guess we'll close the public hearing regarding this, and I think now we can vote on it.
Make motion.
We have a motion to approve the ORC use of this.
Participation policy.
I'll second.
Got a second from Mr. Alves? Any discussion, further discussion? All in favor? Anybody opposed? So moved. Thank you, guys. There we go. Just out of curiosity, when are your dates that you are headed south?
No dates.
No dates. Do you have a date?
I'm leaving Friday.
Tomorrow?
No, a week.
A week from Friday. Okay. All right. So you're going to be gone. You just play by ear. You don't know when.
Yeah.
I play by
I should be
tournaments.
back sometime in March.
What's that?
I should be back sometime in March.
March? Okay.
You better sign this
But I can send the camper in Zoom here.
one.
As long as the
Today's the
temperature's not
16,
warmer than it
yeah.
is here, we'll let you.
Right.
As long as you guys don't get jealous when it's 80 degrees down there.
That's what I'm thinking.
Oh, you all can have.
Just be careful, we might show up at your place.
That's all right. We got a queen size bed in the living room.
There you go. All right.
You need a motion to adjourn the public hearing.
We did.
We already did, yeah.
don't
But I
know.
will make a
We just
motion.
closed it, we don't need the motion to close it.
I will make a motion to accept the meeting minutes as written. If everybody's done reading them.
Did everybody, I don't think we have had a chance to
Oh, they
technically
haven't.
review it yet,
No.
but
Well, I'll second it, but we need to discuss it.
What are we voting on then?
The minutes.
So first of all, right under approved minutes, it says second by Stave. Now, I
Stave.
assume that's Steve's European name.
Cabana.
And then we talked and made a motion, I'm sorry. Stave. We
Who's
talked and made a
Stave,
motion
Stephen?
About contract zone, and it's not in
We did, okay, yep,
here. Right?
Oh.
So
Yeah,
we
that's
made
missing.
we made
Oh,
a
yeah.
motion.
I made that motion. I wasn't here. I shouldn't have made that motion, by the way.
so we made a motion to remove contract only.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was,
I did watch.
I think it was 5-0 was the vote.
I think he probably has it written
Yeah, I
down, I think
think
he
so.
just forgot to, yeah.
Yeah, I watched the YouTube. I think that it was.
What was the motion?
There was a motion to remove contract zoning out of the ordinance, and that was approved, the whole section,
Last meeting.
the last meeting.
It was 5-1 and.
And it's not here in the minutes?
It's not recorded in the minutes. Sorry, Don?
I'm saying the vote was 5-1 and Dave Duong was the one who voted against it.
Correct. Yep.
Just, I mean, point of my notes anyway.
So we'll make those corrections for next
Yeah.
meeting.
Are there any other ones?
Yes. Where it says Matt made a motion to increase 150 feet to 200,
Right,
it should read
decrease,
decrease from 200 to 150.
150, yeah.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Any others?
Well, your driveway is longer than 150 is what you were trying to say?
Right, because the current ordinance in 10.6.6 says driveways longer than 200 feet. My motion was to make that read driveways longer than 150 feet.
Hmm,
And for clarification, chief, the 150 feet, the turnaround would be at the dwelling or somewhere near the dwelling. It doesn't, if you have 300 feet of road, you don't need every 150 feet. You need it at the end.
At the end, within the last 150 feet portion of that road. there has to be a turnaround.
When you say last, you mean the last section closest to the road or the closest to the house?
There's dwelling.
Closest to the dwelling.
Gotcha. Okay.
We should probably put that in there and clarify that.
Yeah, because they would put it down towards the street, which would help them,
And yeah.
you know?
Right.
All right, I missed
And
that.
maybe that if it's a dead end road, you know, it has to have it if it's a dead end road, right?
Well, at any dwelling, it would be a dead end road.
So
Right.
that's
I-
Technically.
That's true,
Right, I
yeah.
think, because we're talking under accessory dwelling units. I think the intention is it's a driveway, it will be a dead end.
Yeah.
But we also have an ordinance on, the street ordinance talks about dead ends and having that turnaround.
So can I make a suggestion, just so it doesn't get overly confusing? We had already agreed and voted and approved to change the word, the ordinance to decrease from 200 down to 150. But can we just add to where it says, must provide an adequate emergency vehicle turnaround closest to the dwelling? Or how do you want to word it? Like, we can change the wording that we forgot, because that's a good point. We should clarify, is it the last 100 feet closest to the dwelling?
I would say within 150 feet of the dwelling.
Okay. Within,
Or, you want to say that?
How much hose do you have, chief?
The pre-connected hose lines on the fire trucks are 200 feet.
so Dave can put in the right wording in a minute.
I was just, the only reason why I asked is, sometimes you might have an 80-foot house. I'd hate to see something technically get by you and you not be able to get there.
Well, and that's where I was on last meeting, was within 50 feet of the dwelling. The fire truck has to be able to drive within 50 feet of the dwelling. But the turnaround could be 100 feet backward,
Gotcha.
right?
You just
So
want it to be.
the
long
idea
enough.
is we don't want fire trucks backing more than 150 feet.
So put your turnaround within the last 100, or that 100 feet of the dwelling.
Right. Right. I mean, and even if, if it's a very long driveway and the fire truck has to drive another 600 feet or a mile forward to get to that turnaround, driving forward is typically not the
Backing
issue.
up is a
It's
problem.
backing up is the problem.
Okay. So I'm gonna have Dave amend the wording to include what you said earlier, decrease from 200 down to 150, but also add must provide an adequate emergency vehicle turnaround within 100 feet of the dwelling. Because we're only talking about something that's over 150 feet anyway, so you want the turnaround to be within 150 feet of the dwelling.
Correct.
Right, okay. Just so he's clear on what he needs to, what?
150 or 100?
No, this is for any driveway over 150 feet, but he wants the turnaround within 100 feet of the dwelling.
Okay.
Right? Okay, just so Dave records it correctly, we don't have to reapprove anything, just change the wording. Okay,
And not to confuse it even further, but within 100 feet of the dead end is really, because you could have,
Yep.
we have a back lot that we're with now. You could have one dwelling 150 feet from the main road, the next dwelling 250 feet from the main road, just to be
when you
clear.
say dead end, you mean a dead end street?
Dead end street, dead end driveway, dead end where you can't drive anymore. I don't know how to put it into words, but from where you can't drive anymore, the fire truck or emergency vehicles shouldn't have to back more than 150 feet to be able to turn around and drive forward.
I wonder how we should handle that, because I want to make it like super clear in the ordinance.
Well, I think, I think if we put what we just said down, I think by the time we get it, we don't have to keep kicking it around now. By the time we get it, put it in correct format, we can tweak it and make it so when the time comes, we'll vote on it.
Okay, that's probably better. So we'll just have him make the correction to decrease 200 to 150, and then when we add it into the ordinance, we'll just have to circle back around the wagon and make sure that the wording's correct. Sir?
Could you put it within 100 feet of the end of the driveway? Is that so?
End of
End of the driveway itself?
That's probably,
Yeah,
Nothing dead end.
I certainly don't think we need to overcomplicate it.
Yeah.
Right? At the end of the driveway, within 150 feet of that end of the driveway, is where that turnaround needs to be.
the other thing is, Brenda's going to be aware of what you need, and, they're going to clarify that to the potential applicant anyways, to make sure that they understand it. So,
Well,
okay.
and the only reason why I mentioned we can deal with that later is we're just dealing with the minutes.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I'm
We're not
trying to
dealing
avoid,
with
is
the
to
technical
reword
change of
something,
the document.
right? Yep.
Right, as far as
But let me make a motion to accept this since Peg wasn't here.
Mhm.
Last meeting, so I'll make a motion to accept
As amended.
with changes.
The minutes,
Yes.
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. Okay. Get that done. And now we can just keep going where we were, but we, keep me honest here, Dave, we said, now that Peggy's back, Grandma, I should say, no, Nana,
Nana,
Nana's back. Thank you. We're gonna get the rest of the guys to sign this. Oh, Matt gets signed. Now that Nana's back, we last talked about ADUs, and we said, let's wait till Peg gets here. So let's pick that up, so we don't lose track of that.
I did watch that on the YouTube. And
Yeah. Seemed pretty clear cut, but, you know,
yeah, and I seem to remember, when we went over ADUs is what, these changes that we made to ADU. This was what, geez, 3 meetings ago, 4 meetings ago now? I think it
Started
was the
that.
one that you weren't here, it was the only one you weren't here.
right, Roger, do you need to sign that? You got to sign it.
Yeah.
Sign that.
Yes,
So, yeah, I think that I saw you guys talk about this, I'm watching it, the last meeting on YouTube, and yeah, I think the only thing that I wasn't sure of was,
thank you.
did we get all the way through and put the whole short-term rental to bed? I don't remember that, I think at that meeting, if I remember correctly, we said
Yeah, there was no, there was
it
no.
doesn't belong here in ADU, at a minimum, is what I think.
That was my understanding. I don't know if we had any further discussion beyond that statement.
I don't have the document that Dave
This one?
did, that one.
Yep, that one.
Where are we here?
That-
Zoning ordinance.
Zoning,
It's, we're
10.6.
talking about the changes that were made to 10.6 in the zoning ordinance for ADU. And, let me see if I can do that in here, but, the changes that were made and whether we were going, I don't know that, do they even need to be voted on? Back to that.
Well, this is
the thing.
the point I was
Right.
making.
This is
So,
the thing.
so we didn't, well, I didn't have this, but what we were talking about was, well, we talked about it in the minutes and we approved it. But now when you have it and you see it, we can, correct, pick it apart, whatever. Now we have a document to actually go by, to approve.
Right, and I think, like I said, at the last meeting, I think we were, for those that were present, we agreed on what the proposed changes were. What the one comment was, we wanted to give you an opportunity to comment on what was proposed.
Yes.
And that's where it kind of ended.
Yeah.
So I think that's where we pick up now, is saying, what do we, I'll focus on you, like, everybody else provided their comments at that meeting. What's your comments on that part?
I think this, as it is here, I think is good. These were the changes that were emailed to me
Yes.
from that meeting.
do we have copies of whatever you're referring to?
That would have been shared out, but I don't know if I have an extra copy or not.
Do we have a photocopy of it?
We do.
Yeah.
Right there.
Turn it on.
Yeah, no.
I'll reach in there. No, I think it needs to be,
Turned on.
not here.
We'll have to wait till he makes his copy.
Not the one saying power?
No, there's.
It's on the side.
Yeah, this little latch switch here. Yep, just, it's in and out. I'd be able to help.
While we wait for that, Dawn, I was gonna tell you that I think the last time I talked to you, we had said you were having problems with the Google.
Oh, I still am.
Okay, so this is what I found out. When we set up the Google group, you had a Fairpoint, I think it is,
Yeah.
email. So now that you have a Google email, I cannot change your email in Google Groups.
Oh,
So you have to send me an email or lymanorc@googlegroups.com
yeah.
from your Google email.
Oh, from my Google.
See, this is what.
Yeah, I got a Google, that's a
Yeah.
Gmail.
Yes.
Okay,
So
I've got
if
it.
you send an email to this address,
Yeah,
it will request that you
change it to.
become part of the group and we accept you.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And then you should be able to see everything.
And we can remove his other one though.
We can remove him, but we can't change his email address.
Right, we
Yeah,
can't add it manually.
Yeah,
right,
He has to request,
correct.
or it needs to come to us. That's what I thought.
yeah, that'd be helpful because I haven't been
So
using
what's
that
going
Gmail.
on with his?
Yeah,
Because he's not getting them either.
same thing.
Is it a different email?
Send
I don't think his email is a Google email.
I'll give that
Because this is company address. EMS.
Adrenaline's a killer, I remember lifting a 175-pound generator out of engine 23. Took 3 guys to put it back in the truck. Like, at the time, I picked it up. Yeah. Like,
Yeah, it's not.
Of course. But, so he has to send an email to that?
He has to,
So maybe that's the problem. I'm
yeah,
sharing it, but because he's not an accepted person, I did add him in there,
you did, but
but he's not linked because he needs to send it to us. I didn't even realize that with Google Docs, that you have to.
yeah, I
I mean,
Googled it.
have you-
Because I tried.
have you been
Google Groups,
issuing
rather.
Google Doc email, broadcast emails all along here?
Yes,
Because I haven't gotten anything.
see, something's up then.
Do you have a Gmail address?
Yeah.
And I wonder, is he in here with a Gmail? Okay, so if you send us an email at Lyman ORC, I'll write it down for you.
Oh, I've got one of these already. I've got right.
I think we're gonna shoot.
You're gonna look like me, Dave, you better get with it.
What is it, Peggy?
Right here. Send a test email to that.
Lyman,
Thanks, sir.
thank you.
Yeah.
ORC,
Oh, I'm sorry.
what?
I cut it.
I don't.
What's that? Oh, yeah.
Google Groups is all one word, I take
Yes.
it?
And again, just point of clarification. Google Groups is different than Google Docs. They're related only because they're owned by Google, but Google Groups is just a distribution group. You can create. Google Docs is different. That's where you can, store stuff in Google Docs format and share it out to people, which is what we're currently using to share out stuff that we work with and approve and whatnot. But the Google Groups is just so everybody gets notified of something. But I think Peggy just clued in on the problem, which is unless you have a Gmail account, it would natively see that. We could add that in, it would get there. But if not, you have to send an email to that Google Groups email, and then it'll come in and say, hey, this person's trying to be part of this
Be
group.
proud of your group.
Let them in or not,
Right,
type of thing.
right.
And then once you say yes.
You gotta request access. You have to click
That's
on
what
it.
you have to do.
Yes,
You have
to that Google Groups.
I'll try to-
Address.
I'll try to make it.
Yep.
From your email address. That way we can accept you as a member. And you
'Cause-
should get all the
Because
information.
technically you're not linked, I think is the problem. I added you in, but until you
Yeah.
send it to us and we say, yes, let them in the club, then you're connected link-wise, and then you should be getting the broadcast. That's why I couldn't understand why you weren't getting the broadcast.
Yeah.
But it'd be nice if they say, you send the request to
Yeah.
Dave for him to accept. Like
Exactly,
you would think it would do that, but
right.
That'd be too easy.
Right.
We're dealing with computers.
Yeah.
All right, so everybody has a copy now of the proposed changes that we discussed for accessory dwelling units for this particular ordinance.
What is the dark yellow?
The dark is green and the less dark or the gray is yellow. So the yellow would just
So-
be the strike through. That's what
So
we're taking out.
1062 is 800?
Yes, 800. Change it from 600 square feet to 800 square feet.
Yep.
And then 1063 would be the accessory dwelling unit may be added to the existing dwelling structure attached to the existing structure or in a new structure versus shall be located in either the same building or accessory building to the principal structure. The accessory dwelling unit, including those located in the basement of a single-family dwelling, must meet egress standards of NFPA Life Safety Code 101.
Oh. Isn't it more than just NFPA life safety code, aren't there building codes requirements?
As well as other required codes and standards.
Right.
That's covered there with that?
And then 1066 reflected the change from 200 down to 150.
So is this where we want to add some more nomenclature to clarify?
Yes. Proposed wording, Matt, to make it super
So-
clear to you.
I'll
No
just
pressure.
read the code that I'm referencing and see if somebody smarter than me can come up with terminology for an ordinance. Dead end fire department access roads in excess of 150 feet in length shall be provided with approved provisions for fire apparatus to turn around.
Okay.
Can you read that one more time?
Dead end fire department access roads in excess of 150 feet in length shall be provided with an approved provision for fire apparatus to turn around.
So why don't you just add the
Why
word
not that?
driveways to the beginning of that and say driveways and dead end access roads greater than 150 feet must provide
Adequate.
adequate.
So where in NFPA world, where I get to put my 2 cents in is the approved provisions. And my approved provisions are at the end with 100 within a 150 feet of the end of that is where that turnaround should go.
So that should, so this is the spot to put that then?
As you just
I would
worded
think.
it.
Yes.
Driveways in excess.
Well, I think we want driveways and, or dead end roads. Because there's two, right? It could either be a dead end road or it could be a driveway, right? You want to make sure that, because it
Yeah.
doesn't matter if it's a dead end road or a driveway. If it's longer than 150 feet, you want to make sure that they have a adequate turnaround for emergency equipment
Yes.
within 100 feet of the end of that driveway or road.
Yeah, I think 150 feet is acceptable.
Okay.
Within 150 feet of
Yeah.
that dead end.
Okay, so I have driveways or dead-end roads in excess of 150 feet must provide adequate turnaround for fire,
Yeah, our ordinance says emergency vehicle turnaround.
for emergency vehicle turnaround.
Yeah, and then I don't know if the words within 150 feet of the end clarifies it well enough.
Okay. Within,
And the only reason why I say that is because the way I interpret this is it could be a 300-foot long driveway and they put the turnaround at
Oh, I know how you say it.
At room, at my, at.
But a
mile
second
marker 50,
sentence,
You know,
Yeah,
second sentence, this turnaround must be within
oh,
150
no, you can just add, must provide adequate emergency vehicle turnaround within 100 feet, 150 feet of the end of that road or driveway.
Yep, that's, I just, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right?
Then I-
Is that how you
Say it again.
Emergency vehicle turnaround within, not within, within 150 feet of the end of that, the driveway or dead end road.
and playing on your wetland question, doesn't have to be at the 150 foot
Right.
mark. It can be at the 75 foot mark, but
Yeah. Yep.
somewhere's within that.
Is that the only thing we need to change on that?
I guess the only part is, say you have a development, all the houses have to be providing a turnaround within 150 feet. So if they all had long
But wait,
driveways.
isn't that different because that's a subdivision? And that has to follow subdivision?
Yeah. subdivision.
Rules?
Right.
Yeah.
it's a
Right,
whole
we're just
separate-
dealing with accessory dwelling units.
Yeah.
In the odds.
This is just ADU.
Yeah.
This is just ADU.
What you're talking about is covered in the
Right.
subdivision.
That is covered in that, okay.
And typically, like the one we recently did up Rock Road, there was, I believe there was one turnaround towards the end of that road or something, I don't remember the exact details, but I think
Right.
there was only one turnaround.
Right, and I don't believe any of the driveways are
No,
gonna
they-
be
they
within
were
excess
short.
of 150 feet.
No.
So they don't need to.
Sure.
George, what this is aiming at is if you build another structure as an accessory dwelling unit in your back lot, I hate using the back lot, out back someplace.
Yeah.
And you build a road, well, the
Then-
fire trucks are gonna be able to drive there, but within 150 feet, we gotta be
There's
able to
gotta
turn
be a
around.
place to turn around.
Is it safe to assume that within a subdivision, that there would be no driveways in excess of 150 feet?
I guess conceivably, you could have one, I don't know, because a
Has to have
huge
a turnaround.
subdivision. This was a cluster subdivision, which.
Because the only reason why I bring it up is because we might want to make a mental note that when we get to the subdivision part of the ordinance, to add that in as well.
And also, just for reference, I'm not saying it's right, but the subdivision is not an ordinance.
No.
It's policy.
It can be changed by the planning board as currently standard, and there may be some areas that would ought to.
But if we had it in there,
Yeah.
somebody would have to have a damn good reason to want to change that. But if it's in there, it's in there. Then he's covered, whether it's a long driveway in a subdivision or it's an accessory dwelling
I
unit.
think it's a good idea.
Okay.
Can I make one English comment or just a nit? I can't do it myself.
We rely on you for that, John.
Thank you. Everyone has talents that need to be exploited. In the first sentence there, it says, one accessory dwelling unit shall be permitted on a lot. And then it says, which an owner occupied single-family dwelling is located, which meet the following conditions. I would suggest maybe changing that to permitted on a lot, either where, or you could say on which, but which, at first which seems out of place to me. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but.
Yeah, it should be
it's a
where.
little weird.
Where,
On
It shall be permitted on a lot where an
Yeah, I'd
owner
say
occupied
where is
single-family
better.
dwelling is located, which meet the following conditions.
Where?
Yeah, two whiches got me.
To which has got you?
It's Halloween.
It's after Halloween, Dawn.
That's the-
Sorry, Don. What's the section was that?
That was 10.6, Joe. Under ADUs.
Where? Okay,
Why
Can
don't
I
you
just ask
Well, can
one
we say-
question though?
yeah, sorry.
go ahead.
Why is there not, you might know this,
I
John,
don't know.
why is there no language about getting a permit for an ADU?
That's a building permit.
Yeah,
It is, but it's different if it's attached. I mean, if you're gonna build an ADU,
You'd have to go through
You'd
the
still need
building.
the plans, you'd still need a
to
building
get the
permit.
permit.
Yeah, you have to go through the code enforcement officer. That doesn't have anything to do with the planning board, but go to the
No.
code enforcement officer for a
Right.
building permit as well as other permits that would be needed to construct that. I assume you have to have electrical and plumbing and all that
So
other.
as part of process, it doesn't necessarily need to be stipulated in the ordinance per se,
I don't think.
because you can't even get there until you have a permit anyways, because that's the process. Right?
I don't see a lack of clarification. I mean, I think it's okay the way it is. I don't think.
Along with the septic. You know,
The septic, yes,
will also-
yes,
Yeah,
has to
same
be, that's true, right? Yep.
Can I mention one other thing just quickly? On ADUs, you don't need to know why, but I was at Hancock Lumber, changing something, getting something. I saw this magazine there. It must be some real estate magazine, but it's a green and healthy Maine homes, fall 23, winter 24. And has a section on, quote, amazing ADUs. So they're publicizing it now. It also says in there, has hope I get this right, a QR code. You guys probably know what that means. Some of you do. George, you get it. But, and it gives you the legislation, but it also says in here, the regulations which were originally scheduled to go into effect July 1st of this year will go into effect January 1st, 2024 for municipalities with town council form of government and July 1st, 2024 for municipalities with town meeting governments. It says for specifics, et cetera, contact your local municipal office.
Oh,
So
wait, are they neglecting the towns that it doesn't apply because?
this is just a summary, but basically it's touting the wonders of ADUs. So apparently, and it shows some of these, and they're sort of fancy, but which I guess what you'd expect.
They're gonna be,
But they're pushing that now, I guess. So that was my point.
yeah.
I just happened to pick this up because I saw that thing and I said, hey, ADUs, interesting. So it's coming.
There's gonna be a lot of them, I think.
So process-wise, next meeting, we're gonna have a document with all the corrections.
Yes.
Then it comes before us, then we vote on it.
Yes. Yeah. And that's fine, because like you said, we held off on approving anything because we knew we were gonna make some changes or get additional comments, so.
So
I'll send
And
these to.
5.2 in the zoning ordinance.
5.2?
5.2 lists permitted uses. And it says the following uses are permitted upon obtaining any required permits from the code enforcement officer. Goes on to list a whole bunch. Do we need to put accessory dwelling unit in there? Because it says dwelling, single family, dwelling, two family.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of, I guess thank you for succinctly putting that, Matt, because it seems like somebody could,
Yeah.
you know, just say, yeah, I'm gonna put it up and, well, my house is permitted.
Right.
I think we should.
Yep.
But not only there,
Well, it can be, but when you're pulling a permit for a house, pulling a permit for X amount of bathrooms, X amount of bedrooms, X amount of separation, you're showing your plans. I mean, we certainly can put it in there, but I don't think nobody's gonna get away with anything, I think, if it doesn't.
But on the flip side, it wouldn't hurt to just put
wouldn't
them in there, right?
Yeah.
You know, you could stuff it after E and make F
ADU.
an ADU and make, farming,
G,
I think if you did that too, that also, then it should also go into the land use table, which is on page 9. So in other words, and I know there's been discussion, Brenda had a good point there, that there's some confusion between the table and then the verbiage.
Yeah.
And they should match up exactly, but there's something, and she was proposing, I think, a better system to maybe just have it all in one place, but I don't know if we ever get to that point, but if you, maybe ADUs ought to go into the land use table also.
yeah, it should be dwellings, comma, ADU,
or spell it out, accessory dwelling. unit.
yeah.
And I guess that would be in all units, all
Districts.
zones, right?
Yeah, I don't think by the state law we could limit where they put them. I think it would have to go everywhere.
Residential and general purpose. Yeah, this thing is,
So site review for all three? No.
So I'm gonna throw something out there. So if you separate it, like it's a separate permit, what's gonna stop somebody from pulling a permit for an ADU, for an 800 square foot house where do we, tiny homes are regulated, correct?
Mhm.
So are we not in the realm of a tiny home now, if we start doing that? I'm just throwing it out there.
I don't think we have one in our zoning ordinance though, do we?
Right, but what I'm saying is if you're separating, like for a separate permit, I mean, this is supposed to be a part of your lot. You live there, your home's already built. I'm gonna come in for an ADU. That's a building permit.
That's what I did.
But what I'm saying is I guess if it's not worded right, couldn't somebody come in and put an ADU, an 800 square foot building on their lot? But do we allow tiny homes? Isn't that classified tiny home?
Well, right, but isn't that getting into the uncharted territory of, does it fall under LD 2003? Because that's what the whole point of,
It's not
You know.
necessary.
well, it's not, but if it's a separate building, right?
It's a dwelling unit, right?
It's a dwelling unit, and that was the whole point of LD 2003 was to increase housing density.
Mhm.
But you're right, I mean, like,
Mhm.
I hate to always even say this because it gets down rabbit holes pretty quickly, but what's the definition of a tiny home? Is it just based on square footage, or is it, well, it was built on a trailer and it got parked somewhere and they took the wheels off like a mobile home?
I thought it was square footage.
Is it? Because I don't know, like, and maybe that's what, towns have to determine is what constitutes a tiny home. Is there a state statute that defines that? Or is it, because your point is, I can call it an ADU. It's not a tiny home, it's an ADU, right? So it says I just got a full permit.
Yeah, but isn't an ADU supposed to be an accessory to the primary unit?
Right,
Isn't that the?
Right, but that's why I'm saying there shouldn't be a separate permit
But
for it.
doesn't it also stipulate that an accessory dwelling unit can be a separate structure? We just read it.
A separate structure, but not standalone.
On the same lot as a primary structure.
Right.
You have
Yes,
to have a primary first.
but, okay, so I'll play devil's advocate. I have a tiny home that I just built and wheeled onto my property. It's next to my house, but it's a tiny home.
Mhm.
Needs a septic and all this other stuff, right? So what's the difference?
There isn't,
Right,
if it meets all the standards.
Okay, so if there's no difference, then the point is, you can pull a separate permit for an ADU and put it, if it goes in here, you can pull a permit for an ADU and put it on your lot where your house isn't a part of, or, your house is not there. It's a vacant lot.
Yeah.
And you put an 800 square foot house on there.
So the way I'm looking at this right now is, where in this book does it tell me I need to get a permit for an ADU? Should I have a permit for an ADU? Do I need a permit?
Well, again, it's building. It's building. You need a building permit
Yes.
for construction.
Right.
Don?
That's
Would
what
be-
I'm doing.
Right now, we have a definition for dwelling unit, and then we have also a definition for dwelling, single family, dwelling, two family. If you had a tiny house, that would, my opinion would be, that would be a single family dwelling. If it was the first, in other words, if there was no other structure on the property, and you say, I want to put on an 800 square foot or whatever, there's no minimum size that I see in here. Maybe in the codes there is one, but,
Okay, so we have nothing, there's nothing here. We're basically saying now that you can have an 800 square foot home.
Mhm.
Technically.
Yeah.
Because I guess if it stands alone and you need a building permit, well, it's not called an accessory dwelling unit, it's called a dwelling
it's
unit.
a dwelling unit.
Right, but an accessory dwelling unit, we're saying, has to be on the same plot of land as your primary residence.
Right.
And that's the difference, right?
Yeah.
Because if it's not on your primary lot next to your residence, then it's a tiny home.
Right.
Because you might have a back lot, or you have a separate plot of land, you're gonna stick you can't call it an ADU because there's no primary residence there, right?
Right.
So is, just to back up, is the real question, are you saying that we should have, we don't need to require a permit specifically for an ADU?
I'm
Or we
thinking you're already covered under the building code. But you
Gotta get a permit.
have to get a permit for it.
Right,
And if there's gonna be a secondary dwelling on that property, the
Yep.
building inspector is gonna inspect it.
Yep.
Anyway, the plumbing inspector, the
And if you come for a
electrical
permit,
inspector. So right in their permit will by default say ADU.
yeah, because that's what it would be, because they're sticking this on an existing lot with a primary residence, this is now called an ADU.
And I guess with that said, said people in the primary home move away.
Right.
They're not supposed to be able to rent that unit and make it a dual rental,
Correct.
which again should apply to the building permit.
Correct.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
Mine too.
Where did the no rent come from?
Yeah, what is that?
Well,
Owner
if
occupied,
if
right?
it's owner occupied, if you can't have one unless it's an owner
Oh,
occupied.
yeah.
One of the units have to be owner occupied.
Yeah,
And is that
But if
an
the owner-
LD 2003 thing or is that town
That's
alignment?
Town line.
Where
So
is
That
that?
may be overridden anyway.
Where's
In
the
10
owner?
place,
ADU permit,
10.6.
1200,
Where the
Two rentals, you mean, on the same?
owner occupied.
Okay.
So,
At this point.
and again, just for my knowledge,
Oh,
so
okay.
if I wanted to turn my basement into an accessory dwelling unit, do I have to pull a permit?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, because you're gonna be doing electrical, you're gonna be doing egress, you're gonna be doing
Plumbing?
plumbing.
okay, so we add ADU.
And I guess as long as that's clearly understood in this book, I'm happy.
So what we're saying is the table is gonna say dwellings, comma, accessory dwelling unit. Yes, 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 right?
Yes.
Permitted,
We're proposing that we add that in.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's-
Not to.
That's the
Whether we
proposal.
need to or not, I guess, is the question. Whether we need to or not is the question.
I think we should,
It's not gonna hurt.
on here, on the, this part, on
Page
So
the
land use tables,
land use table.
and also in the other thing would be to add it into the following, unless we somehow combine the two, it should also be added under permitted uses.
Yeah,
under
5.2 is Matt Brown.
5.2, 5.3, and 5.4, I guess. Yeah,
It's just clarifying,
yeah,
because ADUs are being called out and it's applicable to LD 2003, even though it doesn't apply to us, it's prudent to call it out in the ordinance so it's clear that this includes accessory dwelling units.
Well, I think my only concern is that people, because there is going to be a lot, I think there's going to be a lot of ADUs coming. And I think that there's a lot of desperation out there for these ADUs, and the price of them is very expensive. It's going up every day. And I think more and more people are gonna start putting them in their basement without egress, without that stuff. And they're saying, well, if I just have Joe Schmo come over and put a electrical outlet there, somebody can put a stove there, and there's your ADU. If we're not very clear that this has to be permitted, then
But that goes against building code. I mean, that goes against building code. You can have a 10-room house, but you might only be able to have a 4-bedroom septic.
right.
So those other rooms have to be designated something else that comes under the building code.
Because your septic's designed for your entrance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not looking at it as from a code standpoint. I'm looking at it as a safety thing as opposed to building code.
But would they get
Whereas-
flushed out when somebody comes, like you're saying, somebody pulls a
How would
permit?
Brenda know that you have an ADU in your basement?
Well, let me answer that by backing up to what you said earlier, was somebody comes in and pulls a permit to add a receptacle in their basement. It just happens to be a 30 amp, 220 volt receptacle for a stove. you know, because somebody's got a cot stuff over in the corner and now it's, somebody's living there, you know? But they needed a stove, so they just pulled the permit. I mean, that's what you're really talking about is, all I had to do was pull a permit for a 30 amp, 220 volt receptacle, you know, or a receptacle. But that, the
Who
point
cares
is,
about the septic or whatever?
but I guess my point would be to do what Dave was saying is, if you pulled a permit for that receptacle, somebody ought to ask the question, well, wait, this is a 220 volt, 30 amp receptacle, like a stove would plug into. Why would you be having this in your basement? Oh, well,
Okay, right.
my cousin's nephew's friend is living here now.
Mhm.
Well, then that's not, you know,
The only reason why I brought it up and went to 5.2 or whatever it was I brought up was just a question of clarity. Is it clear that if I build an accessory dwelling unit, I'm Joe landowner, is it clear to me that I need a permit? And do we need to make it black and white to assist Brenda in doing her job? To make it clear to say, if you do an accessory dwelling unit, you need a permit.
and I think if you're adding it to the land use table and you're adding it to section 5.2, the answer is yes.
That was,
And the land use chart itself.
That's what I said.
And
Yeah.
the wording,
Well, and 5.2.
the wording under 10.6 says one accessory dwelling unit shall be permitted. So it uses the words permitted.
Mhm.
So, I mean,
Pretty clear.
if somebody is gonna do it without a permit, they're gonna do it
They're gonna
without a
do it
permit.
anyway, right?
Until
You're right.
somebody
You're
turns
right.
it in or there's an
Yeah,
emergency,
you're
somebody
right.
dies.
right, we're not gonna stop them.
Correct.
What they do.
The same thing could happen with electrical or any other, or septic or anything
Mhm.
else. If they don't pull a permit,
Yep.
you can still do it, right?
That'll keep us up to date.
So,
So I think that we're all in agreement. We're gonna add it to 5.2.1 and we're gonna add it to the land use tables on page 10. Is that right?
yeah, 9 and 10 and thereabouts.
Who's doing all the secretarial there?
Peggy's typing it.
You are? Okay.
Shouldn't ask a question you don't want the answer to.
Yeah, it might be George.
Well, I was secretary last time. What's his name? Dave wasn't here, so that's why I was asking. I was a little late in the meeting to suddenly discover I should have been taking notes.
So would they, obviously they'd be allowed in the residential district.
Yeah.
The general purpose district. But I've never understood this anyway, the commercial / residential district.
Yeah, and the reason that's commercial / residential was because when it got changed to commercial, people who had residences in the quote, commercial district were concerned that they couldn't do certain things, or that's my memory anyway, so we ended up going to a change to make it read commercial / residential. Somewhere in here it says, if you're a commercial building, you gotta follow the commercial rules in that zone. And if you're a residential building, you gotta follow the residential rules in that zone.
So then it would have to be yes with an asterisk.
Why would they ask?
Well, so that people understand that you can't have an ADU inside a commercial building.
Yeah.
Well, it's, okay, probably, but it also, remember, under the definition of ADU, it says, owner occupied single family dwelling. So it covers it there too. So it's not, I mean.
So it's yes across the board then.
Yeah, that's.
Joe?
So, Peggy, you back what you have for 10.6.6? Sorry, I wasn't.
10.6.6 is driveways or dead-end roads in excess of 150 feet must provide adequate turnaround for emergency vehicle within 150 feet of the end of the driveway or dead-end road.
100 or 150 or 100?
150.
150, okay, thank you.
Anything else on ADUs? Go ahead, sorry, Roger.
Yeah. At the last meeting, we voted to suggest that we get rid of the contract zoning.
Correct?
Would it be wise for us to go back to the land use table and see if we can open some of that up? Where I think when we went through it last time, we just said, yeah, and we went down through. But there's places in there that we could ease up the no parts and maybe put it to home occupation.
Because of the omission of contract zoning? Like, what's the connection with?
Well,
contract
yeah,
zoning?
we're gonna lose our contract zoning, and I agree, we should.
Yeah.
But I think we should go back over the land use tables,
Mhm.
like, home occupation for a daycare is, if a young couple gets married and they have a child at home,
Mhm.
and the girl's gonna stay at home, right now, she's not allowed a daycare, by the way, I read. And we could open that up to, home occupation, let the code enforcement officer handle it, because they gotta get a state permit anyway. Another section is service, auto service.
Mhm.
I don't think people realize how many auto service garages we have in the residential area. We are littered with them.
Well, we're not supposed
People
to.
don't even know they're there. We could open that up to a home occupation. And if we go down through that list, I think we'd find a number of them as we're going through it, that we could open up.
So just to make sure I understand your request, for everybody's benefit, is you're saying to go through the land use tables, because we're getting rid of contract zoning,
And
it is, as to not squash the idea of a home occupation, that you would turn around and make provisions in the land use tables that would,
that would
Allow that to-
allow that
so
stuff.
it's not a
to-
contract zone, it's not a contract.
It's not a
just-
contract
You're
zoning
allowed
at
to have a
that
home
point.
daycare
It's a
or-
home occupation.
Yeah.
Or a site review, or whatever it's gonna be.
Yeah.
And we would have to add home occupation to the keys, because up here it's, yes, no, and site review, I mean,
Now, the only question I would
You
have.
have home occupation.
Hmm?
There is home occupation.
yeah, way down, I mean, I'm giving the key.
Oh.
Put your home occupation. I think the town's a little restrictive on their residential. We got 3-acre residential area.
Yep.
And I have 5 acres, I don't use 2.
Mhm.
I know guys that have 3 acres and hardly use 1.
Mhm.
So to say to a girl to have a daycare, or I have a little auto garage in back of me, nobody knows it's there.
We do
I
now.
have it- I have it-
I know you.
No, I have it under home occupation. Patty gave it to me before you guys get the ordinance in. So,
But
I mean,
let me just,
this-
I just want to make sure we stay centered on something before we get too far off track here.
Yeah.
Home occupation is in the land use table, but you're not asking that, you're asking to define what home occupation are allowed?
well, yes, but what I'm saying is, if it says no in the land use, then home occupation isn't allowed. It's no. If it's no in the land use table,
Mhm.
you can't do it.
Right, well, it's yes all across the board right now, for all districts.
Huh?
Yeah, in the current ordinance, home occupation is yes in all 3 districts. So-
There's a I think you have to take a look at the definition of home occupation, which is
Yes.
on page 71, and it gives specifics there, and it's sort of weaselly worded, which gives you a lot of flexibility. I mean, assuming if people want flexibility, it gives a lot of flexibility, but it specifies what the requirements are. And namely, it says employs no more than 2 persons other than family members residing in the home.
Yeah.
So in theory, then, you could do, I guess you could do an auto repair there. I don't know, if called a home occupation or something, or something. As long as you didn't have more than 2 family members, you'd be legal, as long as you got a permit.
But if it says no,
Where does it say no?
right here in land use, it says automotive and sales and service, no. And if it says no, then the code enforcement
Oh,
officer.
that's right.
Now cannot give you a permit,
That's true.
right? So what I'm saying is we ought to go back down through these.
Oh.
Now, I agree, an auto sales don't belong in residential. But that little service, if a guy has a little garage
Right,
and he needs to make some extra cash, there's no reason why he shouldn't be able to.
Okay, so I think I understand what you're asking for is really, generally what you're asking for is relative to the fact that we got rid of contract zoning, we need to go back through the land use tables and ensure that we're clear that home occupations are allowed
Allowed.
and not restricted by, like I would have read sales and service to be combined.
Yeah,
Like you're selling cars and you're servicing cars,
yeah,
not
but
one or
we
the
can
other.
separate them.
Right,
We can say, auto sales, no.
Yeah.
So underneath, service, yes, and home occupation permit.
right. I'll get to you, one comment. So I guess the thing that's on the table now, so we can keep straight, is are we saying we want to review land use tables now, or do we want to take that into consideration, make a mental note, but when we get to that section to review that we want to include
Well,
that
I thought we
discussion
had
too?
already done, we had already gone.
No, all we did the last time was Joe, thank you, Joe, had gone through and he'd already
Yeah,
cleaned up some grammatical stuff. And
Yeah.
we did that, but we had not thoroughly and officially gone through land use tables. Because we said we wanted to add a lot to our land use
Yeah.
tables, and Brenda gave us some
well,
examples.
when we were going through that, I was gonna bring it up.
Yeah.
But
We haven't done it
at
yet,
that time, we still had contract zoning.
correct, Yeah.
But we don't have that anymore, and
right.
for
I-
people to be able to use their land,
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
we need to go back through these and look at them and say, we can open it here, and
With a
we can let
filter
a girl-
towards the fact
we
that we
can
don't
let a
have
girl have a
contract. Yeah.
daycare under home occupation. The fire chief, your men still look at daycares,
Do we
And-
inspect them?
and you inspect them,
We do.
and code enforcement would look at their state permits.
Permit.
Just go through. code.
Well, and I think, yeah, I don't want to get off on a rabbit trail, but I know
Yeah.
for home daycares it's different now, like they're very regulated by the state, and there's a lot of things you
Yeah.
gotta follow, and, you know,
Yeah.
I'm sure,
Oh, yeah,
probably
I
for
know.
residential, you don't have to until you become a center, and that's a whole different ballgame altogether. Peggy, I want to make sure we get to you before we get too far. You have a comment?
No, I was watching the discussion on your last meeting on YouTube about the land use charts, and Brenda's has sent some stuff out that I printed out.
Right.
I printed out a couple different land use things, but you guys kind of touched on this a little bit, and I forget who said it in the last meeting, but I 100% agree with this. If we're gonna look at the land use charts,
Yes.
it's kind of like the snowball effect. It rolls into the other stuff. You
Right.
can't really talk about your land use charts. If you're gonna change your land use charts, then it kind of
Has a ripple
trickles into the dimensional requirements of each of the zones, and do we have enough zones? Do we have, and somebody said that this needs to be, we need to talk to a planner. This is beyond us. I think that the planner needs to come in and say, this is my opinion. What's that?
That was my brilliant comment, semi-brilliant maybe, but I think I mentioned that, I
think
don't know
so.
whether we want to try to, it sounds easy, but do we want to try to get Southern Maine Regional Planning involved?
Yes, I agree.
Because, and it's just that we have, as you all know, we have one code enforcement officer. And
Absolutely.
she is not sitting around, she's busy.
No.
And we have a planning board that
Mhm.
does permits, we do primarily work that comes in,
Mhm.
but there is, we have used the Southern Maine Regional Planning for subdivisions, they've helped us with those, to review those, and they're a good technical resource. They also helped, I believe they helped on the comprehensive plan to back up data, there's a whole bunch of backup data. It's a 10-page plan, but there's a whole
They
chunk
did, yes.
of backup data on the comprehensive plan. So I don't know whether I know we pay them a certain amount of money every year, whether they'd be available to give us some ideas here, because right now we got 3 zones, we got a land use table, and it's pretty restrictive, and we have to sort of stretch sometimes to fit a use into what it says in the ordinance. But there's no way for the planning board to give they're not supposed to be given variances to the ordinance. That's you can appeal that, but the criteria are very limited. So the planning board is supposed to go, I'm saying we do, hope we do, but go by the ordinance. So that becomes a problem. So maybe you could get, but big picture wise, maybe we can plagiarize. I always like plagiarizing because that was
Saves a lot of
somebody
time.
done the work before. And if it makes our job easier, then it's silly to redo try to reinvent the wheel because it's hard to get it right.
I mean, Lee J. Feldman did do Arundel.
Yeah.
He did. And I mean, this is the difference between Lyman and Arundel.
Yeah,
I mean, that's significant. This is the crayon map, this is Arundel.
Well, he did the map, but in terms of the work, in terms of the, like
He
you
did.
talked about.
Yeah, he did it. He actually, Arundel actually hired him as well to deal with the LD 2003.
I got you. So he did more than just do the map.
Oh, yeah.
He was.
Well, he's the one
integral
that
in-
broke up the zones. The actual map, of course, is the map.
But like you
saved
said,
in
he
GIS
did the
that we
work, he was involved in the work to define boundaries
have. And
and, you know,
districts
Lengths and
and so on
districts
and
and
so
stuff.
forth,
It
and the
wasn't just-
dimensional requirements of the
it
districts.
wasn't
and
just
so on.
intake to him saying, give me what you guys decided on and I'll turn that into a map for you. He was integral in coming up with the
Exactly,
limits.
exactly,
Yeah.
yes. So I think that, and I actually asked Lindsay about this, and she said if this was something that the committee wanted, she could reach out and ask what that would cost for him to come in and say, this is what I think about your districts, and not to say that he's gonna say, maybe he's gonna say that, our 3 districts are just fine.
Right.
But I think that it's probably beyond us to.
Well, and I think honestly, that's big enough of a task to really handle that. If we're gonna get help in any area, that's probably a good place to get help in.
I think so
To
too.
take that off our plate so we can continue on,
Mhm.
but that's like bigger than a bread box, right?
Yes,
But to your earlier point, and I think it's important, is there's a ripple effect on that part of it to say, what you change here is gonna affect a lot of other
everything,
things.
it's like a
That's gonna change the
snowball.
wording in the zoning. Yeah,
Exactly.
I'm sorry, go ahead, George.
I'm sorry, did we finish ADU? Excuse me. but
Yeah, we did.
Is that all put to bed?
We can't vote on it because it's gonna be changed. Dave's gonna change it. He'll bring it back and then we'll vote on those. then.
Okay, so are we still discussing it?
I think we were done.
Well, I had one observation to make regarding the 1062, the 800 feet. The city of Denver has varying sizes based upon the property size that you have. So your ADU, for example, their minimum is 200 square feet for an ADU. Minimum,
that's.
minimum. Well, yeah,
Do you need to specify a minimum?
I'm sorry.
Are you saying that you feel that we should do the same? Like, what's the,
Would like you to consider the concept of a minimum size. And then if your lot size is a certain square footage, then you would qualify for a certain square footage of ADU. And that would be increasing with your lot size.
oh, so you mean you could.
So
potentially
you
have
would,
more
and you
than-
would max out at 1,000 square feet of ADU, given a certain amount of it. I don't know,
So they
acreage.
scale it based on your lot size,
Mhm.
but they have a minimum.
Yeah, the minimum is 200 square feet. I mean,
Right.
whatever our minimum is, but they have a minimum.
I think the state defines the square.
I had a note here, which it's not in this wording, but I said that, we changed from 600 to 800 as a maximum, right?
Mhm.
And then also had a minimum of 190 habitable floor area. I'm not sure where maybe if that came from Brenda or not. I'm not sure where that number came from.
I'm not either, actually, now
Because,
that you say that.
and it's not in the wording or anything, but somebody's supposed to have said that. I didn't come up with it, so might have been Brenda, I don't know.
Joe, doesn't LD 2003 have a minimum?
I'm looking for it. Oh,
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it does.
maybe that's where I was
Well, without getting bogged down on the minimum, I was wondering how the committee felt about the concept of a graduated scale.
Based on lot size.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why your ADU should be limited to 600 or 800 feet if you have a lot of land. You know,
but there is a maximum.
But at that same point, I don't know why you would cramp it up if you have a smaller postage stamp lot like a shoreline zone. You know,
We're not cramping it up. We're going with the same minimums. Or the same, you start at 600 or 800 square feet
That's different.
So
and
basically,
go up.
That's different.
basically, the bigger your lot, the bigger your ADU can be.
Up to a maximum.
Up to the maximum that we have to come up with the parameters we all feel is appropriate.
You're just really what you're proposing is a scale versus a set limit.
Yeah, just, 800 or bust, I don't think is appropriate.
So in the state law, it does say ADUs must be at least 190 square
Yeah.
Square
feet
feet.
in size. Municipalities may set a maximum size
Mm.
in local ordinance.
So that's where the 190 came from.
Yeah.
Okay, which we don't need to put in, if that's in state law, that doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
in the ordinance.
No.
Oh, it's in the state law, so we don't need that.
Don't have to.
So then we can drop that out and just discuss whether we're interested in a graduated scale. I think you should be allowed to have a larger ADU if you have, somebody who's got a 100-acre property.
Well, they have that. They have, didn't they come out with,
You can basically build a house, but you can't subdivide it and sell it and, right? I believe it's there, George.
What you can add to your main property?
If you have the setbacks, you can build another house, but you're not gonna be able to subdivide it. The bank's probably not gonna want a loan on it.
Why
Right
couldn't
now,
you,
it's not over 600 square feet. We want to
No,
move that house. to 800.
as an ADU. I'm talking a completely separate unit, family dwelling.
well, my understanding is
Yeah,
the ADU does not have the 5-acre or 3-acre minimum requirement. If you do have that as part of your ADU, is what you're saying, you can subdivide it. Nothing to keep you from subdividing, it, right?
No.
but an access.
No, because if it's a 3-acre zone, you need 6 acres in order to subdivide.
Right, well, that's what I'm saying. If you have the 3 acres required to subdivide your ADU, you can do that, right? Why
But
not?
what about the frontage requirement?
But you have to adhere to all the
Have to go through all-
parameters, Peggy.
Yeah.
And then you can subdivide. But I guess what I'm saying is that in terms of just ADUs and
No, we're
is
making it.
that you should be allowed to have a larger ADU if you have a
But
lot
it
of
still had the 600
acreage
right now.
without subdividing. And it's a matter of whatever anybody's comfortable with how much square footage. What's the max? Is it gonna be 1,000? Is it gonna be 1,200?
Do we have a reference from other towns in Maine that are currently doing that?
Not in Maine. I
Yeah,
just
I mean, you mentioned
quoting-
Denver, but
Yeah,
do we know
what
if
they're
other
doing.
towns are
And
doing
they're talking about, this is the city of Denver, so if your lot is 6,000 square feet or less, you get 650. If it's 6,000 to 7,000 square feet, you get 864 square feet. And if you're over 7,000 square foot lot size, that's small.
That is small.
You get 1,000.
Wow.
Wow,
Obviously, that's
much like your neighbors.
city life.
Yeah.
We're going over that whole thing now.
That's,
All right, just something I wanted to
so,
bring to the table for consideration.
Okay, anything else on ADUs other than the proposal to consider a scale-based approach to,
I would
ADU
love to hear
size.
Brenda's input on that.
Sure.
I would. Let's,
and my understanding is she did.
Joe, if I may,
I'm sorry, go
if I
ahead.
may,
where did I see that? That you can put a separate home on your land as long as you have the setbacks and everything else.
That's
Where did I read that?
It's
That,
well,
that's the state.
Well, there's-
Right, but is it,
There's a dwellings, two-family, which is permitted.
well, you need double the land.
Well, let me see.
Hold on a second, Joe.
I thought it was a part of LD 2003 somewhere.
Oh,
Oh,
Because we had this discussion in the very beginning, and we talked about, the issues that would come along with that, and a lot of people wouldn't do that anyway,
right.
because of the banking issue, because of the separation, because of the,
Well,
That's-
if you have 5 acres and you want your son to have a house, he can't finance
Right.
it because he don't own the land.
Right.
So how do you build him a house on your 5 acres?
Right. that's,
That's what
That's why I always said the town ought to go to 2 acre, 2 acre lots.
Yeah.
Comparable
right.
in size to the original dwelling. So, accessory does have that indication that it's smaller in scale, if not immediately attached, that is adjacent to the principal dwelling. So, for some of the reason that you mentioned too, Dave, I don't think anyone would go that route for
Right.
financing purposes and such. Frontage would barrier to.
Yeah. Frontage would be a big deal.
to the point though, it says dwelling two-family, which is permitted
Yeah.
use. It says 2 units designed and intended to be used exclusively for residential occupancy, living independently of each other in separate dwelling units. So in theory, what would stop you from adding a dwelling unit to your, if you have the setbacks and the land, et cetera, to your existing home? I mean, assuming you got your own financing and all that stuff, there's no financial questions. Why couldn't you just add it on?
I've asked Southern Maine Planning and Development this question pointedly, and they did not have an answer either.
I mean, the way I read the ordinance, it sounds like it's illegal. If you want to take, say you have 3 acres or 4, whatever you got. Seems like you could go ahead and just attach another house to it if you wanted to.
To provide the septic system.
Yeah,
If-
septic,
if-
I mean, all
if
the
you-
permits and-
If you build a 2-family home, and it is a weird distinction,
Yeah.
ADU versus 2-family.
Right.
You're supposed to basically have double the land. Or like saying,
But it says they're not permitted to do that with LD 2003.
but that wouldn't be an ADU.
Well, it
No,
says
no, it's
additional
not
units
ADU.
may not require more land area per unit than the first unit.
Not ADU,
Which
but I
is,
think-
which is where I read, with what I had said, yes, what would stop people from doing that? But to me, practicality and finances would probably stop that.
But
Right.
two-family dwellings are permitted in all 3 zones currently by the current ordinance. So,
Yes, but the land amount,
The land,
Differs.
I mean, the required square footage.
no, I don't see where, okay, say
Of
you
land.
have 3 acres, okay, I get 3 acres, but suppose I don't want to, suppose I wanted to add another dwelling onto my unit, what would stop me from doing that? I mean, as long as they got the permits and septic and all that stuff.
I was under the impression
I thought we had to.
that you need 6 acres. If it's
So,
3
yeah,
acres, you need
If you
6
have a
acres.
duplex, you need 10 acres
Yeah,
in general purpose zone,
yeah.
is the way I understand the zone right now.
Well, I don't read it that way, I never came up with
10.1.9,
State 1.9?
Town, okay.
Where is that?
point 1,
The state said the town can't.
multifamily
We're
dwelling
not
units.
talking, we're not talking
Two-family
ADUs.
dwelling units area shall be equal to that required for an equivalent number of single-family units.
Where is she?
Turn
Double the acreage, right?
Yeah.
10.19,
Page
page 53.
5.3. Maybe bumped up there.
I think
It's
that
not,
is.
10.1.
It is.
10.19.
53 here. Oh,
Which I
that's-
think is
no, that's
crazy.
multifamily dwelling units.
But that's what you're talking
Isn't
about.
that a
Why is it there?
multifamily?
Gee, that's a bad place for it.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's because it says, it's got multifamily, it's 1019-2, 1019-1. Two family dwelling units, area shall be equally divided. Units area shall be equal to that requirement. Okay. Area.
Double
Area.
the acreage.
That's the way I see it,
You're saying the area there is referring to the
acreage.
acreage, huh? That could be clearer, couldn't it? I think, well,
Clear as mud.
yeah. Huh,
Mhm.
I don't like that.
I don't like it
I don't like the
either.
wording, I don't.
It is what it is, right?
Yeah.
Because if you read the land use tables, it'll appear that you can just do it.
Mm.
It's-
Right.
I don't even know what this point one is even trying to say.
This-
I'm reading it and I don't
This,
even,
this 10.19, you mean?
yeah.
So
Or
basically.
1019.1.
Yeah. Yeah.
Two
it's-
family dwelling units.
So if you had a duplex, if you're in general purpose and you want to build a duplex in general purpose, you have to have 10 acres.
Who says that?
That's what that's saying, 10.19.1.
Boy, it should be worded more clearly, I think,
Wow, I,
if that's the intention of it.
yeah.
I think it's crazy, but I think that's how it reads.
Doesn't make
I think not necessarily a duplex, two family dwelling units. So that's two different buildings.
No,
Right.
well, either or,
Either or, it's just separated by a demising wall.
either or.
So that's like a duplex,
If there's two units, two families,
right? One building, but it's a duplex.
Yeah, I wish Brenda were here, we could ask her what her interpretation.
You'd have to have 10 acres.
I've spoke with Brenda about this. Brenda
Is
said
that
one
right?
thing, Patty said
If you wanted to
another.
build a duplex, you'd have to have 10 acres.
It shows it needs to be
Mhm.
clarified.
That's,
Right.
that's what
Yes,
That's how I read it.
Mhm.
And you have to have 50% more frontage than,
Mhm.
Well, I guess you have to read it that way. Yeah, that's certainly is.
Mhm. I don't necessarily agree with them, but
Well,
it is
anyway,
what it is, right?
I'm sort of getting off tangent. What other chunks of work can the ordinance review committee do? In other words, you got, I think, contract zoning, voted on, right?
Yep, done.
ADUs is done.
Yep.
And yet voted on, but,
Little
you know, it's done, the wording's done, right, or almost done. And what else? There's one other.
Well, what the part B to that was, there was a proposal by Dave Dulong to take the wording for ADUs that we just cleaned up and apply that to the shoreline district, because there is nothing in the shoreline district for ADUs, period.
Okay.
So that was the proposal. We haven't discussed it or gotten to that point
So
yet.
then I'm just saying, I'm just thinking the timeline here, because if you go after the land use tables as a subject, that's where if you could get help, might be worth time. I might save time.
Well, that's what the proposal was. from
So is
Dave.
there another chunk that is coming up that could be a discrete chunk that could be discussed that might be able to be cleaned up and put on the list to go for November 24? Is there something else?
Well, I would suggest short-term rentals.
Yeah, it's not even covered. Is it?
It's,
Not
we have nothing to cover short-term rentals.
What is your position on short-term rentals, chief?
I want to know about them, and I want to be able to inspect them. Really my only position.
Okay, so you're not saying that you're against them, but you want to regulate them somehow?
What was the first part I missed?
Short-term rentals, knowing about them,
Oh, no, yeah.
knowing that they're-
Awareness and inspection.
and inspecting.
From an inspection standpoint, just for my own pure curiosity, like, from your perspective, what are you inspecting for? What are you looking for short-term rentals?
The big thing we're running into is people don't know where they are.
Okay,
So clear addressing, clear access.
Yeah.
We like to see like a binder of some sort or even a post-it on the refrigerator that says your address is, and if you have an emergency, call this number.
oh, so, yeah, okay, now I know what you're saying. So, yeah, people are there, they're renting, they have a problem. I don't know where this is located.
And
I
then,
don't know what the street is.
and then it becomes egress as the next
Yeah.
bigger issue.
is that something that can be handled on the regulation? If you had a short-term rental and it was almost an ADU or what have you, in the 911 address, if you had a separate, would that even help?
If they're
You know what I'm
calling,
saying?
if they're calling from a landline,
Yeah, but not from a cell phone. Or a voice.
But if you give
or
them, yeah.
IP phone, I mean, like, Roadrunner, or, I mean, Spectrum, you're getting their phone service, that's internet-based phones. You have to register.
but
your
everybody's
address.
using this.
Right, yeah, if you're a rental, you might not have a phone there, somebody's gonna call from the cell phone.
You come up with
Nebraska
a
phone.
San Francisco area code calling from a rental.
Right.
Right.
Right. Those are the major things that the fire service in general is dealing with short-term rentals. I mean, most people are using short-term rentals as a vacation.
Yeah, no, that's, anything else, just out of curiosity? Yeah. Addressing and, yeah, okay. Well, and actually, yeah, no, I've been on a rabbit trail.
So I just think that just to be a little more concise and try to bring us all together. I know that we've got two separate things here, talking about the land use chart and how that goes into everything else. Maybe let's get Lee J in here, so on and so forth. So we have that issue, but also we have the issue of how this is going to be presented to the voters. Do we do separate line items, so on and so forth? Those are Brad Moran questions.
Which he's gonna be here November.
So
30th.
yes, that was the question. November 30th, Brad Moran's gonna come. We're gonna talk about all that, right?
We're gonna bring up to him the ones that we think, he doesn't look at every change we did, but the ones that we think might have, we'd wanna get clarification on, is this okay?
How to present to the voters,
Right.
so on and so forth.
Right.
And then, so if we get ADU done.
Yep.
Get it fit into the shoreland zoning.
Yep.
Then the next thing that we feel probably would be more important, let's start with the short-term
rentals.
rental thing.
Yeah.
As opposed to the land use chart, kind of get that off the table for now until we can see, at least see from Lindsay how much Lee J. Feldman coming in and talking to us would be.
Lee J, or you were gonna propose, oh yeah, no, it wasn't.
Lee J.
Yeah.
Feldman, yeah.
He didn't know. So, yes, because I mean, obviously, if that's not a possibility because of funds or anything else,
Right.
then that's a top priority.
Mhm.
I mean, they both are, but I mean, we don't have that much time.
Mhm.
Time flies, and
Right.
it's gonna be April before you know it, so. I'm sorry, Joe, you had your hand up.
Two things. First off, you get the Brad Barnes approval on the language. At that point, you start collecting the 75 signatures as required by the charter to
Yes.
get them through public hearings and move in that process.
Yes.
For that chunk,
For contract zoning chunk or ADU chunk.
yes.
Mm,
There's no
Yes.
reason why we shouldn't be doing it.
Right,
I'd have to go back to
Did y'all get a copy of some sample short-term rental ordinances that the State Office of Policy and Legal Analysis put together?
I don't believe I saw it, unless,
Okay.
did Julie or Brenda send that?
I got this, and I thought I made copies, real, but this is dated back September of last year. We got Bar Harbor, Portland, South Portland, Freeport, Kennebuck, Port, Falmouth, Cape, with their samples, what they're doing in terms of STRs.
I'd love to see it.
So in other words, in order to save time and reinventing the wheel,
Yeah.
pick one.
Plagiarize.
Plagiarize is,
We're seeing what they're addressing.
Likes to-
See how quickly with this line.
Yeah.
We're cranking this out right now.
I mean, especially if, like you said, not that that's your only concern, but your major concern is it has to be posted where the address is, so it's pretty clear that they know where they're calling from.
Yeah, I
If they have an
mean,
emergency.
yeah,
Then there's, I'm sure there's a whole host of other things that ought to be in an ordinance that says, if you're gonna have a short-term rental, you need to, for the public, this is what you gotta provide. Exit plans and fire
exit plan,
extinguishers and,
smoke detectors in
Smoke-
bedrooms, carbon monoxide detectors.
Right.
You know,
well, I think getting in front of it and permitting it is probably a big deal, just so, I mean, we could tax them differently if it's, you know.
Even
what
if you
I
didn't
mean?
tax them
It's-
differently, I think just from a life
Do it.
safety perspective, there's a
Do
lot of
it.
things you should do.
It's about knowledge. For me, you know, it's
Oh,
really about
getting in front
knowledge.
of it, for sure.
Well,
Because it goes under if you don't.
It's not, it's that, but it's also like, if you're gonna rent to the public, like, you have an obligation to some degree to protect, give them the ability, because otherwise you'll get sued. I rented this from blah, 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 and there wasn't a fire extinguisher around, and I could have,
But do we, that's my question.
Yeah.
Do we define a landlord?
say that again?
Do we define a landlord and the requirements therefore?
Well, I think that's what Joe's making a copy of, is this is what
Yeah.
other towns have. been saying.
Right.
Well, it's not just other towns, but I mean, it's something, we don't have anything like that for the town of Lyman.
But I know South Poland
No,
dealt
no.
with
It's
it.
not just short-term rental, but renting, long-term. You know, I'm a landlord, I've
Oh, I
got
see what you're saying.
60 dwellings.
Yeah,
What's the definition of a landlord?
right.
You know, it's like we spent time years ago with the Ordinance Review Committee identifying the difference between a flea market and literally a difference between a flea market and
That's actually a good,
a yard sale.
yeah, that's actually a
Because
good
they are
point.
two different things.
Because I could own a second home and be like, well, I want to rent it.
Yeah.
Now I'm a landlord.
Exactly. Now you're suddenly a
Why is
landlord.
that much
And
different?
where
I
is
mean,
the onus to fulfill Matt's requirements?
Yeah, I mean,
Is
I
it
guess
on
there is
the
a difference,
landlord or
though.
is it on the people who are now suddenly renting?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, short-term rental, I think would be a little bit different because it's gonna be somebody else next week, you
Right.
know? Whereas hopefully you're renting, you know, with
Yeah,
a lease for a year. Not that there shouldn't be any of those things as well, you know? It's not a bad idea. I'm just saying there's a clear difference, but, you know, if you're gonna rent, if you're gonna be a landlord, then maybe that does require that, you know, smoke detectors are in bedrooms. Because that's your opportunity to get that stuff in place for safety reasons. It's not your dwelling.
But you know, once again, that all falls under the building.
It's all there. I think
All
it's just,
inspections.
it's like we referenced NFPA 101 in the ADU. I think it's just our due diligence to put emphasis on the fact that in the knowledge and the ability to be able to inspect, because what happens the day they're issued their CO is probably different a year or 2 or 3 years later.
Yeah.
So,
So that chirping in my garage, that's not a
Yeah.
a bug, it's not a
That's a
cricket.
That's a chipmunk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, don't talk to Don about chipmunks.
Yeah, he does that.
Kennebunkport, Falmouth, Cape Elizabeth,
Wow.
Freeport, they all require you to register and pay for a fee. And there's your awareness.
Right.
You can't, well, nothing to keep people from going under the table, I guess,
Well,
obviously, but,
of course not. But I mean, I think it's.
but they're all doing the same thing of,
It's interesting. Well, if you, when you enact something like this is an insurance company's dream, because if something happens and, you know, that they'll look at the regulations and see that you weren't compliant. And, you know,
You'll
you're
find
on your
any
own.
way not to
Right.
pay.
You know, any way not to pay.
bingo.
Yeah.
Did they know? Should they have known? What did they do when they knew?
Well, you know, the only difference, I mean, these are pretty big, touristy towns,
Right.
you know?
Agreed.
Well, we don't have any idea now how many short-term rentals there are, do we? I mean, on the ponds, I wouldn't, you know.
Yeah,
And what would you do about existing ones? Are they grandfathered, or are they you make it so that, hey, on an annual basis, you have to now start
I
registering?
think it depends on the wording of the ordinance, but I would suggest that if it's going in there, it should be you want to keep it up to date, you can only keep it up to date if you don't, with some sort of periodic, authorization of permit, so either annual or whatever.
Right.
Otherwise, you know, somebody could say, well, I've always rented. We've had some cases of that.
That's why I brought it up.
Right.
Yeah, I think it should make it an annual requirement if you're gonna have short-term rentals, short and defined short-term rentals. I think it should be an annual requirement too, just like a dog.
Required for
license
new
or-
or existing short-term rentals.
And I mean, I'm certainly not looking at this from the financial end to make people
Yeah,
have to be registered or be permitted, but from a safety end,
Point of view.
every single short-term rental we should know.
Is there a way in your system that you can plug that in?
Mhm.
Or where you have your, you must have a system that
Yeah.
lists everybody?
Yep, we have a very extensive pre-planning system that's about to go online January 1st.
Wow.
We just got to be able to have the data to put into it, and it's a good mapping system. It shows a picture of every house, and we can put different
Yeah.
information into it.
And this is interesting too, that like
So is that like what I said to you?
in
Yeah.
South Portland, for example, like they're including in theirs that fourth bullet point where they're charging $100 extra for a fire inspection. Not that, like you said, it's not the finances, but they're tying an inspection by the fire chief to theirs. Whether or not we charge the fee or not, it ought to include, there's no short-term rental permit approved until a report from the fire chief,
Or designated representative.
or designated representative, right? Yep. Makes sense.
That's good.
Thanks, Joe, for that. Awesome.
That would be,
All right. So here's what I heard. We made some good progress tonight, but also you're gonna check with Lindsay about what it might take and how quickly. That's probably the bigger thing too, is how quickly it might be possible to have some help, whether it's EJ Feldman or somebody else, to come in and talk and do some work for us on behalf of land use tables, which would cover what you talked about. I want to make sure we just acknowledge that. We got ADUs. The one thing I don't know is, should we just say or just ask we're gonna vote on it for the next meeting, the wording. Could we rubber stamp that into shoreline? Or do we think that there's gonna be discussion?
Unless there's a sliding scale.
Right.
Right.
Sorry.
We're looking at him, actually. So we're talking about ADUs, and if we can take what we did tonight and vote on at the next meeting, but then take what we voted on and say, we're gonna rubber stamp that into the shoreland district, which has nothing about ADUs currently.
Yep.
Other than the proposal that you threw out there about a sliding scale.
Yeah.
So we can bring that up at the next meeting before we actually vote on it. And I think it ought to be just as simple as saying, do we make it a sliding scale up to a maximum? And it's either 800 or 1,000, whatever you figure out.
I'm gonna
Or
speak
not.
to Brenda about that before the
Yeah,
next meeting.
you wanted to talk about that.
Get input from Brenda, yeah.
Yeah, I would like.
Okay.
Yeah.
I hope we don't get off on rabbit trail, but I want to make sure that if it makes sense, we do it. But then
Yeah.
can we just take that and rubber stamp
I
that
think
to
so.
shoreline and save
I think
ourselves?
so.
I hope so. Okay, and then, right. We get some minutes to revise and then approve for the next meeting. And then, I'll make a suggestion that for the next meeting, we have a copy of the current ordinance that with the approved changes that we've agreed to review, plus we'll have a copy of the minutes that we approved, so we can look at both and say, here's the whole document, but this is what we talked about at the last meeting. And we could technically backtrack that through all of them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, I think that was it. And we gotta get Steve to sign this and Dave when I get back. I'll put that on Lindsay's desk to hang on to it, so she can, or I'll lose it.
Are they gonna email us a copy of that?
Copy of what?
We're gonna put it in the group.
I can use the other computer to join you guys, but I can keep my same.
I got you.
Okay.
Okay. Sounds good. Should we call it quits now?
I'll make a motion.
I second it. All in favor?
Right.
So
you,
Peggy,
guys.
I sent you an email.
Yes,
Let me
yeah, either
know.
Mike or I will see it and we'll just
Yeah.
approve it.
If you're nice, and you don't bite.
Yep.
right around.
Can that be developed into like a, fill out your own report? Your own pre-plan for you guys and
So
provide the info?
they, I didn't look into
We
it.
are looking at it.
So
We
this,
are,
this company's called
we
First
have a
Due.
committee.
They have
Yeah.
a
Look at what we have now. Look at.
module, they call it,
They suggest.
called Community Connect,
Okay.
where you
Oh,
could log in
yes,
and you could
yes.
add a whole
Oh, you
bunch of
could fill it
information.
out? Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
But I think it's probably another $600 a year that we haven't bought into yet.
the.
You have to pay for that.
Yeah. But it is something on my radar.
Put the cart before the horse.
You know.
So you guys can't fill that
But,
information
hey,
in while
it
you're
is
all
what it
sitting
is.
around
We're
the
working on it.
station?
Oh, no. And I could easily, yeah, I mean, what we're,
Well, it's too expensive, right?
eventually what we're gonna do